I just wanted to talk about my Duramax LML 2016 dead pedal and the experience that I've had with it so far. Uh, so I bought my truck about 2 years ago with 60,000 miles on it, and ever since I've owned it, even stock, it was just slow on the foot feet. And after at about 80,000 miles, we deleted it. We did a full delete on it. The truck has got no more PDF, no more EGR, all that good stuff is gone. And we tuned it with a 50 horse tow tune. And that was supposed to take care of my problems. And I was disappointed, very disappointed. It was still very sluggish. It had a lot of power. If you'd roll into the foot feed with just like gently roll into the foot feed, it just go. It had power. It's not that it didn't have power. It was just slow. Like if you'd roll up to a stop light and it turned green and you stomp on it, you'd wait for 2 seconds for that power to come on, and it would drive me nuts. And so, anyways, I read a news article about the CP4 pump and how they fail. The news article is all geared towards upgrading it to a CP3 or whatever. I don't know if that's an upgrade or a downgrade. To me, I don't know. I stuck with the CP4 because I'm not looking for large amounts of performance. I'm just looking for something that's going to be reliable and pull my trailer. So I did some research on the fuel filtering capabilities of the fuel system on these Duramaxes, and my discovery was that it's minimal, and a lot of the aftermarket filters are inadequate. Let's say for Wix, and the Wix is name brand filter, it's only 7 microns, and that's not enough to protect a CP4, a high pressure pump. The original AC Delco is probably about the best you're going to find. There's 2 filters inside that one. There's an inner and an outer, and that one there filters down to 4 microns, which is pretty good, and it's got a water separator and a actual filtering cartridge, because those two are very separate. They function differently. The water separation part of it and then the filtering the dirt is different. So anyways, after reading this article about I went out and I said, okay, I'm going to put a aftermarket lift pump on it, and I chose the AirDog 150 for it because AirDog's fill filters are better than Foss's. Foss, I think they said theirs are 10, and AirDog's is 2 micron ratings. So I went with the AirDog and I installed it. And what I wasn't expecting was that I would no longer have a dead pedal. Now, don't get me wrong, it is still a little bit slower than what the old 04s were. I drove a 05 for years, and I love that truck. That one there was jumpy, it was aggressive on the foot feed. And I would say my truck, the 2016 LML with the AirDog, is it's got a very nice pedal now. The things that I've noticed for just installing the AirDog is that the first thing that happened is it's probably twice as fast from 0 to 30. If you're sitting at a dead stop and you stomp on it to floor it, your 0 to 30 is twice as fast. I could never pull rubber before on this truck. Empty, sitting at a stoplight, you want to play, you'd smack it straight to the floor. You wouldn't get rubber with it, even if you do the traction control off and all that stuff. Now you'll get rubber. Before you're through the stoplight, you'll have both back tires smoking. Another thing that I noticed, if you're rolling up to the stoplight, it turns green and you stomp on it, the power is there almost instantly. Not quite instant, it does spool the turbo. You do have the turbo lag yet, and I think that's mostly tuning now at this point. I think if I were to go back to a tuner guy and say, hey, let's fix this, I'm pretty sure he could. But for me, I'm very happy with it. Another thing that I noticed is that it doesn't smoke as much anymore. Before, it would haze. When you'd have it 3/4 throttle, it would haze. Now it doesn't haze hardly at all. The only smoke I get out of it is right when you step on it. When that turbo comes on, it clears up almost instantly. Another thing that I noticed with putting it on is that when you start the truck, before it used to whirl over a couple times, now it whirls over and it hits, bam, starts right up, and it runs smoother right after it starts up. No longer does it hunt right after it starts up. Before it would hunt a little bit, like 2 or 3 times. Now it starts up, boom, and sits there idling perfectly smooth right off the get-go. It's absolutely unbelievable how that changed. I've never heard of AirDog before I Googled aftermarket fuel systems for LML or Duramax. I knew about FOSS. My buddy had suggested a FOSS way back in the day when he deleted it for me. He was a mechanic and he said, hey, you know, do you want to do more than 50 horse tow tune? You need to do a lift pump on it. And I said, no, I'm good with 50 horse. And he said, okay, cool. Also, I wasn't expecting the delete expense to come up. What happened is we got it stuck and we plugged up the PDF. That's what we did. We got really rough on the truck. It was just a bad situation. It would have never plugged hadn't it been stuck, and that situation was bad from the get-go. But so I wasn't expecting the expense, and then when he suggested putting another, I think he quoted me $1,400 for labor and everything. So I wasn't ready for it, and I wish I would have done it back then. I wish I would have just bit the bullet and spent the $1,400, because I did a sump on it right away. I did a little bit of research on it, and basically what I found out is that you always have a chance of having an air leak if you use the existing suction tube, and some of those suction tubes fall apart after a while, and then you're out of luck. You're sitting waiting till that's fixed. So I went with a sump right away. I bought a cheap sump off of Amazon. I think it was $80 or something, 75 maybe. Very happy with the sump itself. The hole saw they sent with it was absolutely crap. Do not use that hole saw. Go out, buy your own 3-inch hole saw and install that one. And the reason I went with a sump is because the AirDog 150, you're supposed to use something that can allow more fuel to it than what the original OEM suction will. So I had a choice of either installing AirDog's dip tube, and I looked on how to do that, and there you're either lifting the bed or you're lowering the fuel tank and you're installing that through there. And I was like, that's not my thing. I didn't want to do that. So I looked up on how to install a sump, and I liked that idea. That was easy. I gotta say, I dropped my rock guard off the bottom of my fuel tank. I found a flat spot. I installed my sump, and I put a little wood block in between that rock guard and where my fuel lines were so that it can never squish them. And I put it over top of everything again. I just covered everything back up again. It worked perfect. I had to cut a little bit in the front where the fuel lines come out to go up to the AirDog. That was great. I'm very happy with that part of the process. Installing the AirDog was super easy. AirDog's instructions were putting the rubber line all the way up to the engine. I watched a YouTube video on how to install the AirDog, and there was a guy that just looped it in and hooked it up to the original fuel line right back by the frame rail. Worked great, and that's what I did. I plugged off the line from the tank and plugged into the OEM original one going up to the engine, and that was perfect for me. I like that. And I installed an aftermarket gauge up on top where the fuel pressure test port is, just to make sure everything's working right. Because the last thing I wanted to do was have this installed and then having my CP4 sucking through my pump and stuff and not having something work properly. I did find that the AirDog does hunt. I wasn't so happy about that. It'll vary. The pressure will bounce between about 13 to 14 psi at idle, and then when I'm driving, it'll vary between about 12 to 13. It'll just sit there bouncing. I called AirDog about it, and I was like, hey, is this okay? What's going on? Is there something wrong? And they're like, no, that's okay. It's the poppet valve and the relief valve popping and releasing the pressure. So I was kind of disappointed about that, because my opinion is that it shouldn't be bouncing like that. It should be a relief valve or a pressure regulating valve. It can be built better than that. anyways, that's their choice. It works great, so I'm not going to complain. The lowest that I've ever seen it suck it down to was, I think, about 10.5, 11 psi. I still have my temporary gauge set up on it. I used a 1/4 inch air brake line hose and put it in between the door post and the door and just stuck it through there. Works perfect for driving it and just monitoring your fuel pressure right after you put it on. Drove it probably about 500 miles now like that, and yeah, I'm going to take off again after I'm done with it. I may put on a Banks monitor sometime just so that I can, and add the fuel pressure thing on there just so I can always be ready for a fuel filter that would plug or something, because my goal is to keep the cleanest fuel to that CP4 and lubricated fuel. I'm running Stanidine in my tank. I've done that for a long time already. By the way, the inside of my tank was absolutely perfectly clean. I've seen some really dirty fuel tanks over the years, and the only thing I can think of is that Stanidine fuel additive does work. It has really good reviews if you look it up. Stanidine fuel additive has good lubricity. A lot of fuel shops will recommend it. A lot of performance people will recommend it. I like Stanidine. I've had good luck with it. My engine does run smoother with Stanidine in it than if you don't have Stanidine in it. So I'm going to go the route of keeping clean and lubricated fuel to my CP4, and we're going to see how long it lasts. So yeah, if you guys have ever installed or have a LML that's slow, sluggish, like just doesn't have what it should have, before you go to the tuning route, you might want to look at making sure that it's getting fuel, because that original, they sucking it all the way up from the tank, I don't know. It's I guess what's the worst part about it is that fuel filter sits on top of the manifold, so it's always warm there. And when you put fuel underneath a vacuum, it vaporizes, it gives vapor. So you're looking at feeding that CP4 a lot of vapor. When you're running that engine hard, I live close to the Colorado mountains, and I take this truck up into the mountains a lot. And I've noticed it already before I had the pump on it, is that you can literally feel it losing power up in there, and it wouldn't smoke and stuff like I thought it should. So I haven't taken it up since then, but I'm excited to see what it's going to do now, because I guess what AirDog says happens is that fuel filter gets hot because it's right above the manifold. It's probably about 6 inches away, not even, from the manifold. So there's a lot of heat coming up there. When that fuel gets hot and you put it under a vacuum trying to suck it up into that high pressure pump to push it to the injectors, you get vapor, and your engine doesn't run on vapor. It ruins stuff if you get vapor and air in there and water or whatever. So I think that's why it's so important to put a lift pump on these trucks, because Chevy just botched it on that. They should have been, those lift pumps should be on from factory, in my opinion. They should be having a better filter on there from factory. I guess it does work all right. My truck made it it's at 180,000 miles now, so it did make it that far without blowing up. But I always did run the AC Delco filter on it also, and Stanidine fuel additive, so that might have something to do with it. But yeah, anyways, if you have any thoughts that you would like to say, go ahead, feel free to comment. So far, also I should say that I am not being sponsored by anyone. I'm making this video on my own, strictly because I had this problem with my truck. It drove me nuts. And if somebody would have told me that a $700 lift pump is going to solve my issue, I would have put this on years ago already. And how easy it is to install too. For me, it was easy. I followed the directions and avoided half of the stuff they wanted me to do, and it wasn't that bad. So if you're looking at doing it on your own, if you have basic mechanic skills, I'd suggest you do it on your own. But just make sure that you cover your bases. If you don't know what you're doing, then don't do it. But if you know what you're doing and you feel comfortable using a wrench and a hole saw and figuring out which fuse to plug it into and stuff like that, then absolutely go for it. Anyways, good luck.